Okay, welcome back, everybody. It's great to have you all back for our next session. I'm pleased to welcome Sarah Clark, our moderator for the panel, Better Content Discovery in a Streaming World. Sarah, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Shana, and thank you to our panellists who are joining us. As Shana mentioned, the content, or certainly the topic for this discussion, is better content discovery in a streaming world. Streaming video content obviously has never been more popular, and streaming services face a competitive market for our subscribers. So let's get straight to our panellists. To give us an insight into this subject, we've got Ethan Hodson, who's the Manager of Digital Media for beIN Sports for Australia and New Zealand. Adrian Britton, we've got the Solution Director for APAC at Bitmovin, Fiona Murray, Head of Streaming at Neon New Zealand, and Dominic Arena, who's the Executive Director of Strategy Planning and Commercial at Telstra. Let's get straight into this, and also I'd like to welcome our virtual audience who are joining us online, but let's get straight into who our panellists are. If you can give us, say, a 60-second snap or spiel of who you are, and I'll work off the screen. Adrian, who are you and what's the role that you're playing in this company, in your company?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Nice to meet everybody virtually. So my name's Adrian Britton. I am Solution Director for Bitmovin, based in Sydney, Australia. Basically look after the pre-sales, post-sales, implementation and support functions across Asia Pacific in total. In 20 seconds or less, Bitmovin uses the term cloud-based video infrastructure. So essentially we sell two main products, a encoding product and a player product that is deployed across some of the most major brands in the world. The genesis of our organization were our two founders who, as part of their university dissertation, formed the all-important MPEG- or co-formed the all-important MPEG- video standard, and from then commercialized into basically the beginning of the video streaming industry as we know it today. Thank you.
Okay, Ethan, we'll move around to you next.
Hi, everyone. So as mentioned before, I work with beIN Sports Australia. So I look after the Australia-New Zealand market in terms of the products, the Connect product, our streaming product. So primarily we deal with a whole bunch of sports properties, but we broadcast football is probably our key property. So in my position, looking after the development of the Connect streaming product, working in partnership as well with our in-market partners in relation to how we bring this product to market, looking at feature enhancements, working in with our team in APAC to bring the best experience for consumers in Australia and New Zealand.
Okay, Dominic from Telstra, can you tell us a bit about you and about your role in the company?
Sure, Sarah. Hi, good to meet everybody. So Dominic's my name. I'm based in Sydney also. And at Telstra, three main things really I'm responsible for in our product and technology business. One is strategy and the medium and long-term evolution of our product portfolio. That's our product and services and technology portfolio. Secondly is I lead our planning and capital allocation activities around where we're investing in our portfolio in terms of our run the business as well as our new initiatives that we're investing in for the medium and longer term. And then thirdly is responsible for our commercial partnerships with many of our partners, including media partners and content partners, and also others. And that's both organic partnerships as well as inorganic, so potential acquisitions or joint ventures, structures, those types of things as we evolve our portfolio.
Okay, and lastly, we've got Fiona Murray from Neon. Give us a 60-second spiel about who you are and where your company is at the moment.
I am the head of entertainment streaming Neon. Our parent company is Sky Media Network, and we have two streaming services, Neon and Sky Sport Now. I look after all of the entertainment content and run the team there. We merged with Lightbox almost 2 years ago and are the local streaming service here in New Zealand.
Okay. Okay, let's get straight into the conversation, and we're going to break it up into three sections. We'll start with the obvious big picture, the state of the market, a general overview of what's happening in the region. When I say region, we're talking Australia and New Zealand. What's happening, and who'd like to kick it off? I know everyone can have a say on this, or certainly has something to say on it. So, where are we with regards to the state of the market? Adrian.
You want me to start? Okay, so I'm a technology vendor. So for me, we can only reflect what the market's like by the roadmap requests that we get coming in from our customer base. So appreciating that our customers are the big well-known SVOD, AVOD and TVOD providers, there's an appetite for certainly, first of all, quality. So for some of our customers, we are taking them down a journey. Many of them are very advanced in the journey of improving both the sound quality that their offering provides. So we're talking things like Dolby Atmos, 5.1 surround sound, enhancing the audio quality so that when you listen to it on that expensive big television that you've put in the side of your house, you're getting the maximum experience on how the content was intended to be experienced. So there's a sound component, and on the vision component, we're doing the high dynamic ranges as well. So that's specifically technology such as Dolby Vision and the HDR families that go with each of the kind of product range. To allow that, we're having to increase the amount of data that gets sent out. So with that comes the appetite to explore the 4K and the 8K type streaming technologies, and always being confined by the fact that the internet has finite bandwidth. So our compression algorithms are improving both organically and by step change. So we're bringing technologies such as AV1 and VVC to market, which are newer compression techniques, 50% of the original bandwidth of the middle tier, or we're doing the VP9 and the HEVC family, which again is a vast jump across the traditional AVC 264 technology. Apologies, that was a load of technical words, but yeah, basic quality on sound, quality on vision, and improvement in efficiency for the delivery side.
Fiona, let's move to New Zealand. What's the state of the market where you are?
And there's lots happening. As we're all aware, COVID has accelerated a lot of viewing. We saw huge engagement over that period. We can see that content continues to drive those viewing patterns, and global content is what people are looking for. For us, it's really about jumping on that demand, global demand, and continuing to license and acquire content for our service here. Viewing patterns have been changing. We can see a lot more what I know Deloitte coined churn and return. So people coming in based on what content they're looking for and then moving services. I think with the number of services in the market, competition is fierce out there and content is driving that. Although I agree with Adrian, though, the usability and the experience has to be there to watch that content.
Dominic, tell us from Telstra's perspective the state of the market.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're an operator. So we have a streaming aggregation platform called Telstra TV, which we've operated in various forms, initially T-Box for the last 10 years, and now on a Roku white label platform that we also build on. The market in the last 2 years in particular, streaming, talking about streaming particularly, we've seen a significant jump in SVOD subscriptions and generally a massive increase in both TVOD and AVOD as consumption as well. Obviously driven by obvious factors such as lockdowns and people at home, and but also, so we've seen SVOD subscriptions grow to around 3.5 subscriptions per household, and that means a spend of around $50 to $55 a month we're seeing in Australia on SVOD subscriptions, which is a significant jump from where it was 2 years ago. We've also seen an acceleration of sales of smart TVs, particularly in the sub sort of $1,000 segment, which is growing very strongly, but across the board. And in a market like Australia with only around 7 million households, we've seen over 2 million smart TVs a year being sold over the last 2 years, which is massive. So there's really been a huge shift to the consumption and the aggregation experience for digital content.
Okay, Ethan.
Yeah, I think I could probably bring a bit of a sports twist on this. So in the sports market, it's become complex. That would be one thing. So from what I mean by that is we've seen a lot of growth. Initially, we saw a bit of a dip in the initial lockdowns because, of course, a lot of live sports went offline. There wasn't that ability to have athletes out on the pitch competing. And we also saw quite a lot of disruption. So since that's settled down, we've seen a lot of growth come back in, but we're also seeing a lot of entertainment streaming providers also jumping into the marketplace now. Like you've got Paramount Plus, which is a reasonably new one in Australia that's now branching out into sports. You've got, of course, the key players like KO Sports and Foxtel, which we're partners with, continuing to expand their sports properties, and Optus Sports also with their sports properties. So although there is overall growth, there's a lot of segmentation in sport which is occurring, which is actually making it a little bit difficult, I think, from a consumer standpoint, where we've got so many big providers like beIN, like Foxtel, KO, and then we've got these new entrants that are then cutting up the rights again. So we're seeing that movement of subscribers between platforms, but overall there's growth in the industry, which is really exciting. But that's where we're coming from at the moment.
Okay, moving on, given we're looking at time, what about the battle for attention, the impact on churn rates and what to focus on? Dominic.
Hey, sorry, just getting off mute. So yeah, absolutely. I think, look, the battle for attention and opportunities that we see in there, I think we see, firstly, we have built our own user experience on top of a white label Roku platform on Telstra TV, and that's been really important because we've been able to do some really leading things over the last few years, including being very early to move to universal search and voice search, and the integration of free-to-air feeds into our home screen, into our carousel. That's, to have a sort of a single experience and being the one remote control, for that experience on your television in your home. So that's been really, really important. And the other thing in more recent times, what we have done, so we have a loyalty program we call Telstra Plus, and that has, well over 4 million members today in Australia. And we have introduced over the past year a points to pay system. So you can use Telstra points, which you earn from using Telstra services across our ecosystem. And then you can use them to buy, for example, movies in our box office store. And in the last year alone, we've seen over 2 billion Telstra Plus points burned in that store. And it's massively sticky from an ecosystem perspective, and customers love it.
Adrian, looking at from you guys, what about the battle for attention and churn rates?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a couple of things that will instantly turn off any consumer from your service. And the first thing is obviously if they can't consume it in a manner that they feel accustomed to, and that could be the spinning buffering wheel, or it could be that they pick a device out of their pocket and find it's not supported by it, or they cannot transverse from the big TV onto the laptop into the phone as they need to. So not being where they need to be, or not being able to deliver the experience in a manner that's kind of aligned to moving images in a smooth way. And the other side is from the provider's point of view. There is real cost in streaming, especially as technology partners such as ourselves talk about higher and higher quality. So being able to pass savings back to our customers, and I'm talking about material savings in the amount of storage that they consume for these assets, or material amount of savings that they don't pay to the content delivery network providers. And that's just a direct relationship to how hard you compress the assets. So being able to squash the amount of data that goes out can save a material amount of cash to our providers to maintain that growth in content purchase and all the other kind of direction of funds that need to be there to keep our customers alive and thriving.
Fiona, looking at the audience, having the best content, is that no longer the differentiator for the audience? What's the key?
I think we know content is still a key driver to acquire and retain our customers, but usability and experience are really gaining importance for our subscribers to really see value. in what they are paying for with us. So it's extremely important to have a mix of everything there. They'll come in for the content, but I don't believe they will stay if they cannot watch that content at a high level.
Ethan, coming to you, how can you build a better or more improved streaming experience for the audience? What's the solution there? You're still muted, I think, Ethan.
Sorry about that. I think yeah, that's a tricky thing to answer. I think first and foremost, I think the rest of the panels alluded to the basics, getting the basics right. So buffering, latency, and specifically in sport, picture quality. That's a huge factor. And I see that as the foundation from which you build on. So having that solid base of being able to deliver, obviously, the king content that everyone's there for, but being able to deliver it consistently and reliably, but building on top of that UX that's familiar to the user, that can be easily navigated, but also then building those engagement strategies on top of that, how you will enrich those experiences. You know, you might be looking at different marketing automation, push notification, stat enhancement within the experience, specifically for sport. So there's all those other little bits and pieces which go into creating that seamless experience, but the foundation is key. And I think Adrian really ticked the box on that one.
Okay, well, Ethan, while I've got you, live streaming versus on demand, what's your response to that?
Well, for sport, live is always first. Being able to deliver live is, you know, the 80% of the product. There is that other factor of on demand. We've got to be able to deliver on any device, anywhere, anytime. And for beIN specifically, a lot of these sports that people are wanting to watch are European sports. So we deal with a lot of football. So having on demand and then also having clips and different bite-sized chunks that users can or customers can also cross-consume content, and we can create more value to our content properties.
Noting time, I'm looking at 5G. Is this a game changer, Adrian?
I think with all step changes in mobile technology, there's a gap between the advantages of that being realized and the technology catching up. So we've got a think tank that we operate out of Europe, which is looking at the kind of future of video. And we're not talking here about the typical 18-month roadmap. We're talking about the kind of 3 to 5 year step advance from that. So some of the papers that have been published by that think tank, which is known as Athena, are talking about using the edge of the 5G network to advantage the distribution of video content. So being able to make changes and manipulations to what people view or the quality of people view, specifically based on the amount of spare capacity there is on the cell, is a game changer. We're not there yet. Again, this is kind of 18 months plus out, but I think we'll look back at this from 2 or 3 years time and feel it's the same change as when 2G went to 3G, 3G went to 4G. It just takes a little bit of time to get these bubbling through.
Okay, we've touched on reaching and retaining the consumer, but exploring that content or that subject topic more in depth, looking at distribution strategies, and I'll throw it out there, from desktop to mobile to connected devices. What's the strategy? What's the best strategy? Dominique?
Yeah, sure. I think in terms of you're talking which devices, everything is really complementary, I would say. So if we talk about mobile versus a large screen experience, mobile and mobile devices, and you just mentioned 5G, which enables that today, is critical because people do want to consume content on the move, and 5G makes that high quality and even larger screen mobile device screen experience a lot better. But also the sale of smart TVs and larger televisions and high quality televisions show us that the in-home experience with 4K high picture qualities, as well as sound bars and home theaters, which continue to sell off the shelves, is also really important, right? So So from that perspective, mobile versus home experience are complementary, I would say. And then in terms of devices, we're seeing a shift from separate set-top box devices to smart TV, to aggregation on the smart TV itself. And that's a trend we're starting to see. And we're starting to see movement in the customer base based on that as well. So I think that, a smart TV or HDMI 0 position for any streaming aggregator is going to become really important.
Adrian, your thoughts on this? I can see you nodding.
Yeah, so I think the answer is slightly different if you're an advertising provider, right? The dollar figure that you get per 1,000 ads is actually highly variable depending on the device. Anecdotally, obviously I don't have direct relation to this, but anecdotally our customers tell us that displaying an ad on the big screen experience can take a far higher CPM in terms of that campaign than if it's focused purely on, should we say, the more common devices such as a mobile or a laptop. So yeah, I think if you're an advertising provider, going for the big screen is just a no-brainer, just from the sheer revenue that you're going to command from increased ad sales. If you're an SVOD provider and you are doing the Batman movie, the Star Wars movie comparison, there's just no choice, but you have to be on that smart TV. No one is going to watch the blockbuster movie if they have the smart TV in front of them on any other device. It's just the most optimum viewing panel, and as was mentioned, with the best sound, all of the other accoutrements that go with.
Yeah, broadcast versus streaming. I was going to throw anyway. Ethan, you go, because I've got another question for you as well. Go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to add another spin on that, but also to consider the use of other complementary devices within that experience. So, say for example, someone might be watching. We tend to watch long form content on the big screen at home, but also considering, well, how does that primary or secondary device, whatever you want to call it, the mobile device, then fit into that entire experience? So trying to own or view that entire experience, not just on a single screen, but on multiple screens. And that's how you see the next generation now. Like if you've got kids, you'll notice them operating multiple devices at one time. They're not solely focused on the big screen. So I'll just add that.
Okay, well, look, continuing on the user experiences, what perspectives in terms of audio, video, design, etc. are there? Adrian, are you happy to comment on that one?
Yeah, I mean, this again comes down to what rights a publisher has chosen to purchase from the studios, right? And I think we're in a cycle now where if you are a premium SVOD provider, your negotiation with the studio is including the highest resolution, the most color range, the better audio. You can take advantage of that, but only after you've done that first loop of going back to the studio and then having the correct technology stack to make advantage of it. And only then can you enter the market with, should we call it the premium, the $19.99 versus the $7.99 offering, or however you choose to compartmentalize your audience who wish to consume that higher experience. So yeah, starts at the studio acquisition, through the technology, and then into the planning and the offering to the marketplace.
Okay, looking at content recommendations and data collection strategies, Fiona, what are your thoughts on this issue?
We rely quite heavily on both. So we have a mix of content recommendations and data strategies in play that really help us to connect with our customers. Being able to understand their viewing behaviours and patterns is key to retaining, as well as the content discovery. So the recommendations, and in the right time, being able to suggest their next piece of content that we want to move them onto. The content recommendations, we use a lot of content clustering and affinity to work out what we want to suggest to you and kind of watch what we're moving our customers through to as their next piece of content. It's extremely important, as we mentioned before, churn happens at the end of a series. So being in the right time to suggest the content that they possibly didn't know they wanted to watch yet is important.
While I've got you, Fiona, looking at data, how are you informed about what's successful or not for the audience intake, and what matters?
We have quite a few metrics in place. We embed our data team into Neon and have data scientists who are continually iterating our recommendation engines. We're watching probably all of the things that everybody else is. So viewing hours, acquisition, what content is driving acquisition versus engagement, completion rates, also what they're driving their next piece of content. So when I mentioned clustering, kind of looking at what, rather than genres, what else we can move them through. So if there's content gateway to the next piece of content and keeping them engaged. We have a number of daily dashes that we're sort of watching at all times to kind of form that big picture of who our customers are, as well as then knowing what to acquire in terms of new content coming up.
Anyone else from the panel want to comment on this one?
Yeah, if I could.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Ed. Okay, thanks. So Sarah, yeah, I think, look, this is really, the next frontier is really going to be enabled and driven by data and also the application of artificial intelligence to that. And I'll explain a little. So we already do some editorialization, you know, in our carousels and our recommendations on using usage data, and I think that's important, you know, and it's going to grow, and I think we're going to look to do more of that to improve the discovery experience and the relevance of the content that's promoted for the customer to watch. Because I do see, and I think we are seeing what I call fragmentation fatigue, and it was mentioned earlier. And with the fragmentation of content, with all the direct-to-customer applications that are out there, just discovery is just becoming, you know, more tiresome for the customer. And I think the application of intelligence to data can really help that improve that customer experience.
Adrian, I know you want to comment on that.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to touch on something that Fiona said there. There is a critical boundary when you're right at the edge of watching a piece of content as to what happens, whether you continue with the next piece of content or where you navigate to then. You know, a lot of these experiences are designed to be lean forward experiences where you require some kind of interaction. But more and more, and I'm talking especially for short form content, people are thriving on the lean back experience. So from a technology point of view, we treat that last kind of 5% of the content very special, in a very special manner. If it's short form content, and you know that there is a playlist queue of additional short form content coming behind, our player is already buffering or is already bringing in the next piece of content before the first piece of content has completed. And there's a few other examples of how we kind of ease that transition through, you know, brought about by the, you know, should we say the TikTok generation. As you're scrolling through, you just want the next one playing, next one playing, next one playing, next one playing. From a longer form content point of view, as those credits are rolling and people are, you know, packing up the experience and ready to go off and have a cup of tea, that's the point where you do calls to action, you know, and being able to enable up next or other people have watched, and with zero interaction you then roll them to the next part, potentially scanning or seeking, you know, 3% in to avoid the inevitable pre-run pre-credits, if you want to call them there. So basically smoothing that transition between two assets is where we see a lot of customers extending the journey with their viewers. Data, I mean, yeah, the player, if a customer chooses, can originate an awful lot of data. You know, it's very similar data to that you know, people use as their decisioning process. The slight difference with our analytics view is that we don't try and wall garden it. So anything that comes into our analytics is immediately designed to be shared out through either existing integrations, data mining tools, you know, cross-referencing platforms, or it's built on an open platform such that any developer inside the customer base can dip into the ever-increasing pool of data to make their own smart decisioning based on the information we've stored. So we don't try and be the all answer to the analytical data. We are just merely a step in the decisioning process to allow our customers to, you know, do what they do best, make decisions on you know, what the audience will best attract to.
Noting time, I just want to touch on one more thing with Ethan before we move into the third phase of this conversation. Ethan, investing in how viewers discover content, is that as important as the content itself? We've touched on this, but what are your thoughts, Ethan?
Yeah, I think it's a big challenge, specifically in the sports space. Tackling this question, it really does help us to address churn. So yes, it is as important as the content itself, because if we're going to retain customers, we need to look at how we enhance that journey and look at the entire journey and utilize data to do that. So 100%, I think content discovery, trending, personalization, those types of things which enhance the experience and encourage cross-consumption, especially in the sports world where you see polarization almost in, say, for instance, a person that's a fan of a specific team doesn't necessarily want to be served their rival team's content. So you have to be very, very smart, and there can really be an on-off switch with what you could be serving up, especially in the sports space. So it's very important.
I agree with you, Ethan.
There you go.
I was just going to say, whilst data is incredibly important to us, we have a local team of curators, and with being a local brand, we are constantly using their experience to overlay and to check our recommendations and to make sure that, you know, we are serving the right content and not always just relying on our data.
Yeah,
okay,
it can be that one-on-one conversation where you really want to personalize that experience, and it can be like, if you don't get it right and if you haven't invested in that tailoring that experience, it can just be a complete turn off. It'd be having a terrible broken conversation with someone. Did you listen to me? That's kind of what you're trying to avoid.
Okay, looking at the final phase of this conversation, monetization opportunities. Dominic, I'm going to start with you on this one. This is looking at the significant rise in competition, which we've seen over the last few years. Where do you think the opportunities remain in the OTT space in terms of monetization?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sarah. So I think three areas I'm happy to talk about. I think number one, which I just mentioned before and we were talking about, which is the greater application of sort of artificial intelligence to the data we have to improve the customer experience, to help them discover and buy and purchase content or engage with advertising driven content where it makes sense. I think that's I think going to be important. Secondly, I believe advertising is going to become a larger part of the mix for streaming aggregators, and I think we have an opportunity again with data to really have more targeted and enhanced on-platform and dynamic advertising, and I think that's going to really evolve pretty quickly over the next few years. And then thirdly, I mentioned fragmentation fatigue before, and I think things like virtualizing playlists and creating linear type channels. I think Adrian kind of mentioned that form of taking content out of certain different applications and building them into a virtual playlist or a linear type play out, is really going to create some opportunities. And that, of course, brings into question commercial models that have to be worked out with OTT and the direct to customer platforms. But, I think we're on that path, and I think we'll see more of that in the future.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that one? We'll keep moving. Okay, looking at the potential sport between live and on demand. Again, we've touched on it, but at the crossroads of ad insertion and premium subscription. Ethan, your thoughts, this being your area?
Yeah, so there's definitely an opportunity around premium subscription. KO is probably one good example in the market, in that they do have they have had different tiers and things like that, which can be purchased. You're talking about having, whether it's family packs, whether it's 4K or ultra high definition streaming capabilities. Specifically in the sports space, consumers want to see a high definition, high quality picture. So having that ability to then toggle up that premium experience definitely has legs in this market.
Adrian? You're nodding. Every time
yeah,
you nod,
I
I'm
don't
going to go to you.
Oh, okay, I'll stop nodding. I don't think it's an either or. I think, you know, taking Ethan's live sports context to it, there's always going to be companion video on demand content, right? You're always going to have journalists that are wanting to provide commentary about a particular event in the game, and that is naturally going to be served as a rerun, right? As a VOD piece of content. Our sports customers are obviously very, very, very orientated around live. You know, that is the community of getting together and all barracking for your team. So you can never get away from the sheer enhanced power of live. But you know, you just got to leave the flexibility open to allow, you know, the live content to be repurposed other places inside the business, so that they can, you know, maximize advertising revenue or maximize editorial or bring it through grassroots, or, you know, any of the other number of ways that you can repurpose the game for future use and consumption, either internally or for the audience.
Okay, looking at the premium experience, what should it entail? And again, remembering from a monetization opportunity kind of perspective. Who wants to pick that one up?
I'll say something briefly.
You didn't nod,
so,
I'll
stop nodding now. So time to market is just massively critical, right? So if you are trying to turn a piece of content around, you know, even if you're a long form film provider or if you're a sporting provider, the amount of time it takes between that entering your system and it popping out for consumption to the audience is critical. You know, viewers have a choice out there. You know, there will be social media covering the same event. There will be other ways and other brands to pick up the same content. But if you are front of the queue in terms of release windows or in terms of having the goal before everybody else, you're starting with a little bit of an advantage. So I'd say time is one of the things that is important to kind of bring in from the differentiation.
Yeah, I agree, Adrian. Like, release strategy is key for us. We turn around things as quickly as we can with express content. We don't want to dictate viewing to our consumers. And you're right, they can pick it up on social media. So we have to be as instant as possible with it.
Looking at creating value from older catalogues, is this a real opportunity? While I've got you, Fiona.
I think there's still a place for nostalgic content and that comfortability that it brings to a viewer. We still see new release content and old favourites sitting in our trending rail daily. So there is a real mix of wanting both of those, and you might supplement your viewing with watching an express piece of content and then binging an old favourite in the background. I guess a situation for us is with the increase in direct to consumers holding back franchises or catalogues that they might have and taking them to their own service. They're not as accessible as they may have been in the past.
Adrian, what are your thoughts on this? Creating opportunities from the older catalogues.
Yes, so there's always a question. So I'm talking about episodic content here. You know, let's say the home and aways or the Desperate Housewives of this world. There's always going to be an appetite to find the hero content of yesteryear, and in inverted commas remaster it. So for that could mean using our upscaling technology, or it could just be a matter of taking the highest resolution that you have and taking advantage of the encoding technology of today, but being able to find those 12 episodes that back in 1990 were absolute blockbusters, and bring them back as a hero image in your episodic content library is kind of cool. From a sports point of view, I mean, I'll let obviously Ethan and Fiona cover that, but I think there's a certain reason for doing it, right? If you're trying to get audience numbers, then you're going to struggle to find an older game being as high an audience. But maybe that's not the reason you're putting it on your website. Maybe you're putting it on your website for the good of the game. If it isn't on your website, no one is ever going to see that game from 1970. So for the good of the sport and the spirit of the sport, servicing this as almost a historic service, maybe.
I see that there's an essence of that, but at the same time, you can also strategically use that old content because, say for instance, you might have a specific event and in sport you mentioned before, we have a very finite period of time where that content is of high value. It depreciates over time, essentially. But the use of old catalog can be used to prime audiences for those occasions or for those moments. So say an instance that everyone would know would be like State of Origin. It's like having the biggest and best hits before a State of Origin or the classics or whatever it might be. Those events can be used to prime the audience, and that's kind of the way I see it. But obviously there's those other instances like you're alluding to there, Adrian, where you can create more value and occasions for people to continue to watch outside of those events.
And noting we've got 5 minutes left, I want to kind of throw one more to you, Ethan, looking at the future of OTT consumption, what to expect in terms of innovation, diving into bridging the live stadium experience into the home. Just briefly on that, because I want to, at the end, give you guys about 30 seconds each to kind of, for our last question. Okay,
no worries. Yeah, I think, well, previously I had a background in stadia and developing those experiences in stadium and in sport. That's really the holy grail of how do you bridge that gap between the live experience and the home experience. And I see technology coming in to bridge that gap in many different ways, whether it's with different socialization or interactive experiences which can replicate that stadium experience to a certain extent. But also I see personalization, as we mentioned, being massive. And really getting a handle on data. And I think we've heard things like AI thrown out today, but really fundamentally understanding the user and then engaging the user on a one-to-one basis, more immersive experiences. We could throw in the VR, the ARs and everything like that. There's still a long way to go, I think, on those fronts. But that is really the holy grail of bridging that experience and bringing that real live experience into the home.
Okay, Fiona, did you want to weigh into that one? Or?
Yeah, I agree. I think we're going to continue to see the streaming market evolve. I think there'll be more hybrid models, different types of subscription services and AVODs, coming into play for price. The key will be data, and really it is about better understanding our customers so that we can give them what they look for. And being able to market more intelligently to acquire new customers.
Okay, wrapping up, we've almost hit the 45-minute mark. What's a quick 30-second to 45 seconds? I'll start with you, Dominic. Where do you see us heading? And we're already in March. Where do you see 2022 heading?
Well, for streaming and streaming aggregation, which is sort of the lens I'm looking through here, I'm seeing a great time where there's massive demand out there. There are customer pain points where we can see opportunities, where we can evolve the platform, whether it be around discovery or application of artificial intelligence, or driving monetization through virtual playlists and virtual linear channels, or even OTT rebundling, which is something I think we'll start to see, because there is just so much content out there, and people are now spending, as I said, $50, $55 a month per household, and that's not small money for an average household. And I think opportunities to drive value and monetize the platform with a more balanced mix, so you're not just solely stinging the consumer every time that they want to gain some more value, so that you can still generate profitability in a more mixed sort of revenue mix. So that's where I see we're going. I think smart TVs will continue to grow in importance and in the aggregation experience, and the challenge for us all in streaming and as streaming platforms is how to stay relevant in adding value as an aggregator on whatever platform it is that the customer is consuming their content through.
Okay, less than 2 minutes left. Ethan?
Yeah, I think this year the market will probably continue to grow. I think there's a turning point coming where we might see some type of contraction as far as, and also seeing those aggregators and different providers partnering up with it, telcos or whoever it might be. And I think the strategy that we have working with our partners like Foxtel and Fetch, among others, and Sky. It really does provide that better experience for the customers, that we're able to, get around that whole issue of content segmentation. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens as far as the segmentation of content, and when it's really going to turn the point for the customer to really be able to not hold 10 different subscriptions to watch their football team or their favourite player.
Okay, Fiona, and then we'll end with you, Adrian. So you've got a minute or so left.
I think the same as Ethan, like we will continue to see some growth, but it may slow a little bit, and that's where streamers will probably have to get a little bit more creative, looking at Netflix with their password crackdown, Disney Plus potentially going into an AVOD. We've got to start thinking differently about different revenue streams. I think the ecosystem will continue to grow, but so will that competition for viewers.
Okay, Adrian, we'll finish the wrap with you. Where do you see 2022 heading?
Yeah, I mean, we've all said growth, so I'll say growth. I think there'll be entrants from outside of the geographies coming in and crossing regions. So I think the ability to buy rights outside of your traditional geographic location will kick in. That will basically drive more choice for the consumers, which will involve everyone who's delivering an SVOD service to have to always be at the top of their game for the best of the consumer. And I hope that technology such as ours helps the industry do that.
Okay, thank you to each of our panellists. We've got Adrian Britton from BitMover, Ethan Hodson from beIN Sports, Fiona Murray from Neon New Zealand, and of course, Dominic Arena from Telstra. Thank you also to our audience for joining us. And we've got another panel discussion coming up in less than 15 minutes. Thanks for joining us, everyone.